Hey everybody, Sterling R. Jackson. Today we're going to talk about the 3 different types of vocal distortion. So I know this is something that a lot of people always want to know about, and everybody wants to go from 0 to 100, including myself, especially consumer Americans. We want everything right now! So always, and people are just going to skip over this, but always preface it by saying there's a lot of things that need to kind of happen before you can kind of probably do this more properly or do this without, blowing your voice out and things like that. But either way, I encourage people all the time to experiment, because if you don't experiment and find these new spaces or mess around with them, they're not going to reveal themselves to you, or you're probably going to continue struggling. And it takes a lot of experimentation. It takes a lot of making strange sounds and trying to sing like different people and just pushing your voice around. When I say pushing your voice around too, I do not mean pushing your voice hard. I do not mean being loud, because that's not part of this, even though, ironically it seems like it is. The irony is that most of these things actually quiet the voice down a lot more than make them louder. They don't make the voice louder. In simple logic, really quick, sorry to start this more slowly, but if you think about a clean voice, and then you add something over top of that, logically it's going to get quieter. It's going to get quieter. So let's start out of the gate here. I'm going to try to go through a couple little things just to help you find these things, and then as typical with these, I have a Patreon page, and I'm going to continue some of these exercises to help my Patreon people find these things more. If you want to join me on there, happy to answer questions and help people out more, but I usually extend these lessons over to there. So we're going to start off with one of the more simple ones, and one of the things that really lends itself well to nice screams and things like that. This isn't typically the kind of distortion you're going to hear in singing necessarily, because it doesn't lend itself well to holding notes or having notation in it necessarily, and that's vocal fry. So vocal fry screams or vocal fry distortion is a matter of the vocal cords vibrating a little bit more than they tend to, with a little bit of extra airflow over them. So instead of having a notation like a like this, they're going and they're going like this, and they're kind of vibrating more chaotically. So an example of this would be, and once again I'm being very quiet, but all that's happening is just that little extra pressure, that little bit of extra air is making a distorted sound instead of a So then to get a little bit louder, I'm coming from down here. Now, I'm going to keep saying this throughout the whole video. Finding these distortions is not a matter of being loud. It's not a matter of pushing. It is not a matter of going as hard as you can and then be like, there, it's distorting now. When I blow, I've had so many students like that too. Not to mention, I've had so many students that are like, I used to be able to sing like Chester Bennington and it was awesome, and now I don't have a voice anymore. Or I hurt my voice and then it never was the same. And that's because you're not singing, you're just finding some distorted thing and then, getting excited about it. And, I had my moments with those things too, where I was distorting in incorrect ways, and then you got to be realistic with yourself, and keep in mind too the rule of somebody I was teaching said this to me recently, and they saw it in one of my videos. If you have to warm up for like 2 to 3 hours, warm up and sing songs or whatever, to get to a point where you're like, oh, now my voice is working, that is not sustainable either. That is not realistic. That is not how people do these things. You're just getting to a point of swelling there that is not going to do good things for you. So anyway, so we have this vocal fry screaming kind of type of sound. Now, once you kind of find that, these things, trying to find them is always very similar to like kind of grunting or picking up at something heavy, or clearing your throat. That's vocal fry as well. But be careful how much air is passing over the vocal cords. We don't want excess air always passing over the vocal cords, or it's going to dry them out and then your voice is going to start to tank. So anyway, let's start with something like down here from middle C, especially for males. We have an A here, A3. So we try to vocal fry it first. And then we try to gently open up a little bit more and push a tiny bit more air over it. And it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be experimental. It's not going to come right away. So we have... Now I like to use the O vowel for a lot of these because it forces the throat open and nice and open sound. But we are focusing on the pressure, the compression coming from down here where the vocal cords are. That doesn't mean squeeze or anything like that, but that's where it's happening, so that's what we're kind of focusing in on. Oh. Now let's move up a little bit. Here's middle C. Oh. Oh. So I don't do this very often. Let's try down here a little bit lower. So you see those crazy little monster sounds we're getting. Now, if you want to start to practice this in a more healthy way, or okay, you know, how do I make this usable? One of the best ways is to find that and then start to siren around, start to push it up and down a little bit more. Everything I teach and everything I practice is a matter of trying to learn how to do something so that it goes to the top of your range and back down, so that you can move it to the top of your range and back down. And I do not mean the top of your chest voice, I mean the whole way up here. The whole way up and the whole way back down. So just, anyway, moving it around like a siren. But the second thing with a lot of these that's very good to do is singing your vowels. So our vowels are going to change things. They're going to change our mouth shape. If we have a nice open mouth shape, does that make some sense? Like I said, I don't do fry screaming too much because my voice, if you follow my story, I lost my voice years ago because of health issues, and it's not something I focus too much on. Anyway, okay, so moving on. The thing right above the vocal cords, which most of you probably already know about, is the false cords, these fatter parts of the voice that help you to not choke and die. They're called false cords. If you focus with that same kind of O shape in mind, you probably heard them kicking in a little bit while I was doing these weird noises too. You want to pay attention to the space right above the vocal cords if you can, or if you can close your eyes and get into that space. Is good, which is probably why I keep saying same thing. This is very typical for some lower distortional screams a little bit, but mostly just distorted singing. Yeah, the Metallica thing is always perfect. Yeah, yeah. You can hear it continuously kicking in. A lot of times, throat singing is a big component of these muscles down here too. If you can't make that sound, if you can't make this sound, I guarantee if you give it a couple days and you practice for randomly throughout the day, I was like, how the hell are people doing that? And then I found it, I think the second day, and I was able to turn it on and off. I found it with the E vowel, and I found it by positioning and pointing my voice up through my mask or through my nose. And you can find it over and over again. Now, the downfall of this distortion, these parts of your voice will kick in when you distort your voice in different ways, but the more pressure that builds down in that area and the more you rely on those, the more it will tend to limit your range. When I distort in this way, I tend to stretch chest voice, and when I stretch chest voice, it puts me into a more locked, swollen position where I have trouble getting up and out of that when I want to get into mix and things of that nature. These are important things to keep in mind. These are things that I never hear any vocal coaches talk about, and I do talk about them quite often, but I relate it to like this. This is chest voice here, this is head voice, and this is whistle voice. So now, the more I tend to build pressure and build all this musculature and have blood flow and blood rush to this area in my chest voice, the more my voice starts to do this. If I don't get up and out of that, my bridge becomes more prominent, it becomes harder for me to get to this, and I have to stay locked in here. The more I continue to stay locked in there, the more this kind of diminishes. And I'm not talking about over years, I mean that might happen over years, but I'm talking about just in performing on the day, even when you warm up. So a good rule of thumb is to practice warming up high, do all the high stuff first. Because when you warm up high, we're needle pointing the voice and everything gets smaller, and then start to build downward and warm up downward. Because when we build from the bottom and then we go up, everything feels like we're fucking having to go higher and higher, and it gets harder and harder. It does not get harder and harder to sing higher. That's not the way that the voice works. If I go, That's not hard for me to do. But if I want to pull weight into it and make it sound good, yes, it can get more difficult. But once again, you should be in control of how difficult or how not difficult it is. Once again, if I go, ah, it's not difficult. Ah, that's a little bit more difficult. Anyway, thinking about the voice more instead of like this, where everything gets harder as you go higher, think about it more like this, because that's more of what it is. You just have notes across the spectrum. Anyway, so continuing on with this. If you find that distortion, it is going to work its way in there a little bit more, but the most healthy distortion that I've found, or the most healthy distortion I hear most people using, especially people that are more baritone and need to rely on mixed voice and things like that more often, is a soft palate distortion, which comes from up here. Now, if these spaces are elusive and confusing and you cannot find them right away, do not give up. Like anything else, same with mixed voice. You have to spend time experimenting and trying to find these things. They are more about release of pressure and release of tension most of the time than they are about building more tension or building more strength. So I'm going to say those things again in a different way here. Instead of you thinking, oh, I'm not strong enough, oh, I haven't built enough, whatever the hell I need, and I got to practice compression every day or glottal stops or whatever, I would urge you to not do that, and to know and experiment more with spaces that are of a softer, weaker coordination than one that is more powerful or power-driven or whatever. Think about your voice and the way you exercise your voice more like Pilates or yoga, more like stretching than that of build more tension, build more strength. That's not really how it works. You learn how to stretch everything out, and then you learn how to build, strength around that nice open coordination. So the same thing with this. First of all, if you're trying to find mix, that's going to help a lot. This might help you find mix, but I'm going to break this down again like I have before with mixed voice, in that we can build pressure and compression down here where the vocal cords are. But as we tend to rise, that pressure that builds in the throat or builds under the jaw and everything is trying to tell us that something needs to shift and something needs to happen. If you do not shift and push on the clutch and change to a different coordination, that is just going to break. It's going to break and then you're done. So there's another part of the voice that wants to compress above, more in a pharyngeal nasal space above, and you can teeter-totter back. That's such a goofy word, and I hate that I said that, but you can teeter-totter. You can go back and forth between these two spaces. Therein lies the mixed voice dynamic that most people are struggling to find. It's definitely a component of trying to find nasality and trying to find a resonance within that space. Here lies another lesson. When you find some of these spaces, and when you're searching for these spaces, they are going to be small. Think about them like a circle. So when I go, if I can make that noise, I am mixing. But it might be small, it might be weak. The more time I spend in that area, the more my voice will acclimate and start to relax and open up. The more that space will be revealed to you, it will no longer be as cartoony and strange as it might have been at first. Same as nasality. If I go, if I'm doing things like that, that nasality is a big resonant space in my head. But it might be small at first, and your range with it might not be very good. But once again, it's relaxed and my vocal cords are together. Chord closure is everything. So if I can go, oh, someday love will find you, break those chains that bind you. If I can do that over a couple weeks or months, keep spending time in that place and it will reveal itself to you and start to open up and relax, and it will become part of your voice. It is a part of your voice. Right now, it probably just sounds like some cartoony, strange part of the voice. All right? Makes sense? So when we have that, when we start to understand, I'll show you again. Isn't that terrible? All the pressure's down here. Then I'm grabbing a hold up here. Now we get into the distortion of soft palate up here. The great thing about this distortion is that it's higher up, farther away from the vocal cords. Anytime something is farther away from the vocal cords, it's healthier, more sustainable, there's more longevity in it. You're not arresting the body, physically pushing into it as hard. It's easier to do for longer periods. I'll show you what I mean. I'll pick some note right above my bridge. You should be able to do these for a long period of time. Once again, I can sit there and do that all day, and it's not putting a lot of pressure on my voice. It's not putting a lot of strain on my voice, but it's above. Now, trying to find this is kind of similar to mixed voice, but so we'll try to find it with UNG, which is like a French sound, like en. And remember, with all this distortion, our placement is moving itself backwards as far as it can go. You feel it, and you might see people like this, going like this. AC/DC, the dude from Mudvayne, they're going like this. There's a reason for that. It's not cool looking. I don't look good when I go like this. But it's because you're pushing it back as far as you can into the throat. Anyway, okay, so UNG. So if we take this first, this is right through my bridge. If you're a baritone, then you're right with me. So if I go UNG, all the pressure's released from down here, trying to put all the resonance here. Once again, I'll show you the wrong way. All the pressure's right here. It needs to go up here. Now, we're going to keep trying to find a distorted sound in that as well, which is the same as everything else, experimentation, but we can try to find it with UNG, we can try to find it with E, or we can try to find it with O as well. If we do O, remember it's not down here, it's up here. So if we try E, it should sound like a weed whacker. You can make the face too. That's an ah, I'm using that. EH. You hear that? Etc., etc. I'm going to take this lesson over to Patreon, and we're going to continue some of these exercises. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you get something out of it. If you have questions, I'm happy to try to answer them. I can't answer too much, obviously, in a YouTube comment. But either way, we have soft. What is it? We have vocal fry. We have the false chords above. Then we have this soft palate up here. Make sense? I hope so. Thanks for joining me.